guys, welcome to session 10. This session is one of my favorites, so I might put it up on YouTube as well instead of just the online school, just to share with everybody about the in-depth knowledge that Ra has about our history and the other planets in our solar system. And yeah, it's very rich, it's very long, and I'm going to be stopping it a lot, and I'll try not to annoy anybody too much. If you guys are in the school, I really suggest you listening to the entire session once or reading it once without me, so you don't have any breaks in it, so you can absorb all the information and then deep dive it with me, because otherwise we're going to stop it a lot and you're going to get annoyed with me for stopping it in the middle of Ra's words. So let me get into it and share my screen. So for those of you that are on YouTube or somewhere else watching this, this is the online school. And we're in session 10 right here in book 1, session 10. And let's get into it.
The Law of One, Book 1, Session 10, January 27th, 1981. Ra, I am Ra. I greet you in the love and light of the infinite creator. I communicate now. Questioner, I think that it would clarify things for us if we went back to the time just before the transfer of souls from Maldek to see how the Law of One operated with respect to this transfer and why this transfer was necessary. What happened to the people of Maldek that caused them to lose their planet? How long ago did this event occur? Ra, I am Ra. The peoples of Maldek had a civilization somewhat similar to that of the societal complex known to you as Atlantis, in that it gained much technological information and used it without care for the preservation of their sphere, following to a majority extent the complex of thought, ideas, and actions which you may associate with your so-called negative polarity or the service to self. This was, however, for the most part, couched in a sincere belief thought structure which seemed to the perception of the mind-body complexes of this sphere to be positive and of service to others. The devastation that racked their biosphere and caused its disintegration resulted from what you call war. The escalation went to the furthest extent of the technology this social complex had at its disposal in the space-time present of the then time. This time was approximately 705,000 of your years ago. The cycles had begun much earlier upon the sphere due to its relative ability to support the first-dimensional life forms at an earlier point in the space-time continuum of your solar system. These entities were so traumatized by this occurrence that they were in what you may call a social complex knot or tangle of fear. Some of your time passed. No one could reach them. No beings could aid them. Approximately 600,000 of your years ago, the then existing members of the Confederation were able to deploy a social memory complex and untie the knot of fear. The entities were then able to recall that they were conscious. This awareness brought them to the point upon what you would call the lower astral planes, where they could be nurtured until each mind-body-spirit complex was able to finally be healed of this trauma, to the extent that each entity was able to examine the distortions it had experienced in the previous life. Illusion complex. After this experience of learned teaching, the group decision was to place upon itself a type of what you may call karma alleviation. For this purpose, they came into incarnation within your planetary sphere in what were not acceptable human forms. This then they have been experiencing until the distortions of destruction are replaced by distortions towards the desire for a less distorted vision of service to others. Since this was the conscious decision of the great majority of those beings in the Maldek experience, the transition to this planet began approximately 500,000 of your years ago, and the type of body complex available at that time was used. Questioner, was the body complex available at that time what we refer to as the ape body? Ra, I am Ra. That is correct. Questioner, have any of the Maldek entities transformed since then? Are they still second density now, or are some of them third density? Ra, I am Ra. The consciousness of these entities has always been third density. The alleviation mechanism was designed by the placement of this consciousness in second-dimensional physical-chemical complexes, which are not able to be dexterous or manipulative to the extent which is appropriate to the working of the third-density distortions of the mind complex. Questioner, have any of the entities moved on now, made a graduation at the end of a cycle, and made the transition from second-density bodies to third-density bodies? Ra, I am Ra. Many of these entities were able to remove the accumulation of what you call karma, thus being able to accept a third density cycle within a third density body. Most of those beings so succeeding have incarnated elsewhere in the creation for the succeeding cycle in third density. As this planet reached third density, some few of these entities became able to join the vibration of this sphere in third density form. There remain a few who have not yet alleviated through the mind-body-spirit coordination of distortions the previous action taken by them. Therefore, they remain. Questioner, are these the Bigfoot that you spoke of? Ra, I am Ra. These are one type of Bigfoot.
Okay, let me just pause it there and I'll stop sharing my screen. Okay, so just to recap a little bit, and it's interesting that when I found out that I was part of the Rock Collective at the same time when I was doing my my higher self channeling, one of my past lives was on Maldek, basically doing the same thing I'm doing here, which is teaching the law of one, and it was unsuccessful, obviously. So Maldek was one of the first planets in our solar system, besides Venus, I believe was first, and Maldek was second, to attain third density, and they didn't make it. They became very technology advanced. They didn't care about the planet, and they blew up the planet, basically through war, through their weapons. One of the weapons that I do know is almost like Nikola Tesla developed one of these weapons, where you can vibrate against an object and it echoes back and you vibrate it with just a little bit higher vibration, you throw it back and it gets more and more. It's like, you know, when you push someone on a swing, when you push on it just at the right time, the swing will go higher, you know, and higher and higher and higher. And it was like a device like that you can turn on and focus it on a planet, and the planet will just start to vibrate more and shake more and more until it breaks up. Right? There's these weapons that they came up with, because there were those that were on Maldek would sooner destroy the planet than lose it to positive frequency. And that was about 700,000 years ago when it was destroyed. And it took another 100,000 years for very high density beings to be able to reach those that were on the planet, because nothing escaped. They were tangled in a knot of fear that's getting like, we say that, you know, all of us are eternal beings that are just having like a human experience now, and there is no true death. Well, what happened on Maldek was very close, as close you can get to a true death, like being zapped and being lost from source energy itself. And it took 100,000 years until they started to be reached from from the Guardians. And it was about 500,000 years ago that they started being transferred here to Earth to play out some of their karma, to remind them that they exist. And one of them was the type of like Bigfoot that they do, and another one was just the apes that were here living on the planet. Now, Ross says a lot of the time when they have spent enough time there, remember, Earth was not yet a third density planet. Okay, this was Earth has only been a third density planet for 75,000 years. And this was 500,000 years ago. So some of the entities then, remembered who they were, right? And were ready to do third density over again. They had healed enough from their karma. But because Earth wasn't in third density, they went to other planets. But as soon as Earth came into its third density, a lot of them came back, you know, as like starseeds from other planets, because they remember Earth. And now that Earth was in its third density, they wanted to finish their cycle of third density here on Earth. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And it was also the war that was on Maldek, which causes the entities, like we did in the last session. The people here on YouTube won't know, but in the last session, we talked about how some of the Bigfoots that were genetically modified to house and almost be like a refugee camp for some of these other planets like Mars or Maldek when they were destroyed. That's what Earth became to them, a refugee camp. And the bodies that they got housed in was Bigfoot. And Bigfoot got genetically modified to be able to withstand huge amounts of radiation. So if there was another war, they would survive a nuclear war. They would be able to survive the radiation from that, knowing what was being inherited and brought here from the previous planets that they came from that were so warring. and very much on the road to service to south. Okay, so kind of feels like we're Australia for other planets. So I think those were just a great set of, questions and information that we got from this one. And we're only halfway through this session. So let's get back to it. I'll go back to sharing my screen so we can go back. Let's do it.
Questioner, then our human race is formed of a few who originally came from Maldek and quite a few who came from Mars. Are there entities here from other places? Ra, I am Ra. There are entities experiencing your time-space continuum who have originated from many, many places, as you would call them, in the creation. For when there is a cycle change, those who must repeat then find a planetary sphere appropriate for this repetition. It is somewhat unusual for a planetary mind-body-spirit complex to contain those from many, many various loci, but this explains much, for, you see, you are experiencing the third dimension occurrence with a large number of those who must repeat the cycle. The orientation, thus, has been difficult to unify even with the aid of many of your teach learners. Questioner.
Okay, that's an important piece. Let me just, I have to stop again. Okay, so really, yeah, this really does explain how many different star seeds we have here. So like there's a difference. We haven't gotten into wanderers yet, but what's the difference between a star seed and a wanderer? So a star seed could be an entity from any planet that wants to do third density experience here on Earth. So they can be anywhere in those cycles. And the thing is, every entity on so many different planets that were in third density and many planets across the cosmos all wanted to come here to incarnate in here on Earth for the turning of the tide, for the cycle, the final cycle from third density to fourth density. Everyone kind of wanted to wear the pin saying, I was on Earth during the harvest, during the ascension to fourth density. And it didn't, and so we have been inundated from many, many star seeds just right now. Like our population on Earth just exploded in the last 100 years. And that was one of the reasons. And another reason is like a lot of them did come here even way before that as a starseed. They wanted their last few lifetimes and their soul families to come here all together and graduate and be part of the harvest for third density to fourth density. And it's kind of, you think about it, it's like, well, Earth is pretty full. There's not a lot of opportunity to get incarnated here anymore. And you can be like, well, we can put you in Africa, but you're going to die of like starvation at the age of 5 and like a starseed will, but I'll take it. I want to be on Earth. Like, so there was a real inundated of star seeds here. So that is a star seed. So a star seed can be from any system from third density. The difference that a wanderer makes is the same thing, except a wanderer has already been harvested from third to fourth density. Okay, and usually it has to be positive because we're a positive oriented planet. And so a wanderer would be already coming from fourth or fifth or sixth. And the majority of them are in sixth. And at the time of this reading, I don't know if we've gotten into it yet, I think there were 65 million wanderers here, and most of them were from sixth density. So yeah, there's a lot of us, and I'm sure by now we're in the hundreds of millions of wanderers here to bring in the harvest, because that's what the wanderers are doing. They're here to facilitate the harvest, right? To kind of bring it in, as like in Dolores Cannon also called us the second waivers. Now, you might think that during this time of the harvest, and there's still like babies and kids being born, and they're already in fully fourth density, so they can have already been through like a harvest and a graduation on another planet and are fourth density, but I want to experience all of the fourth density cycle here on Earth. And those are like the indigos and the rainbow children, and there's a lot of different names, the crystal children. There's a lot of those names out there that we don't have a blanket term for each one of we have a blanket term for all of them, but we haven't really got really solid definitions in like the human language yet, but we will. So that was just a little, I meant to just stop it for like a minute, but I ended up going on there. Where's my squirrel? See, squirrel, I have to stay focused on the lesson here instead of going off on other topics, but let's get back into it. Share my screen again. Here we go.
When Maldek was destroyed, did all the people of Maldek have the fear problem, or were some advanced enough to transfer to other planets? Ra, I am Ra. In the occurrence of planetary dissolution, none escaped, for this is an action which redounds to the social complex of the planetary complex itself. None escaped the knot or tangle. Questioner, is there any danger of this happening to Earth at this time? Ra, I am Ra. We feel this evaluation of your planetary mind-body-spirit complex's so-called future may be less than harmless. We say only the conditions of mind exist for such development of technology and such deployment. It is the distortion of our vision understanding that the mind and spirit complexes of those of your people need orientation rather than the toys and needing dismantlement, for are not all things that exist part of the Creator? Therefore, freely to choose is your own duty. Questioner, when graduation occurs at the end of a cycle, and entities are moved from one planet to another, by what means do they go to a new planet? Ra, I am Ra. In the scheme of the Creator, the first step of the mind-body-spirit totality beingness is to place its mind-body-spirit complex distortion in the proper place of love-light. This is done to ensure proper healing of the complex and eventual attunement with the totality beingness complex. This takes a very variable length of your time-space. After this is accomplished, the experience of the cycle is dissolved and filtered until only the distillation of distortions in its pure form remains. At this time, the harvested mind-body-spirit totality beingness evaluates the density needs of its beingness and chooses the more appropriate new environment for either a repetition of the cycle or a moving forward into the next cycle. This is the manner of the harvesting, guarded and watched over by many.
Okay. Stop sharing. So what basically Ra is saying, but what you do after you die, what's the way station? How do you choose your next life? What determines where you're going to go next after you die? And basically he's talking about the life review. So, and there's a lot of people that have put out some really great videos out there about really what kind of the process is through death. And Ra is really talking about in this section about the healing process that you go through. So basically, and I'll try to keep it very short. Again, I'm kind of going off here and I don't mean to. Saw a squirrel. When you die and you do a lot of things, you kind of hang out for a bit with your body, you go to your funeral, then eventually all these entities around you, eventually you can't ignore them for much longer and you got to go with them. And you go to you put yourself in what Ra calls in love and light, right? You go back into your light form because you no longer have a body. So you're just a mind spirit complex. And what the healing is, he's basically talking about when you do your life review. Now, doing a life review is not just looking at what you did your entire life and reflecting on that. You go into each scenario that you had with your life and like whoever you interacted with, and it's usually someone you had a soul contract with, you end up going into almost like a dream state and you live the entire lifetime of that other person. So you can reflect completely and have a complete understanding of what happened in that life. Okay, so, and you'll do this outside of time. It can be very variable because remember, if you led a really bad life and say you were a mass murderer or an abuser of sorts, in your afterlife, when you're doing your life review, you are living the entire life of everyone else you hurt. And so you're going to be able to experience what they experience. And this is kind of what you would call hell. Because if you lived it's not purgatory, you're not there forever. But when you do your life review, that's the healing process to have a full understanding. And only after you've lived both kind of sides of everything you interacted with your life, will you have an understanding enough to be able to choose the next one. So if you lived a very good life, this can be a very pleasant experience for you, right? And the healing process won't take very long at all. And then you'll be able to, and then we'll get into it later about how you choose your next life. But that's basically what Ra was saying there. So just back it up a little bit and listen to that again, because it's pretty like froth with a lot of good information and understanding in it. So let me go back to sharing my screen before I go off too far into the afterlife stuff. I'll have a whole section on the school about the entire process of the afterlife when you choose your next life. But that was just a little teaser, I guess. Here we go.
Questioner, when the entity is moved from one planet to the next, is he moved in thought or by a vehicle? Ra, I am Ra. The mind, body, spirit, totality beingness is one with the Creator. There is no time-space distortion. Therefore, it is a matter of thinking the proper locus in the infinite array of time-spaces. Questioner, while an entity is incarnate in this third density at this time, he may either learn unconsciously without knowing what he is learning, or he may learn after he is consciously aware that he is learning in the ways of the law of one. By the second way of learning consciously, it is possible for the entity to greatly accelerate his growth. Is this correct? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner, then although many entities are not consciously aware of it, what they really desire is to accelerate their growth, and it is their job to discover this while they are incarnate. Is it correct that they can accelerate their growth much more while in the third density than in between incarnations of this density? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. We shall attempt to speak upon this concept. The law of one has as one of its primal distortions the free will distortion, thus each entity is free to accept, reject, or ignore the mind-body-spirit complexes about it and ignore the creation itself. There are many among your social memory complex distortion who, at this time-space, engage daily, as you would put it, in the working upon the law of one in one of its primal distortions, that is, the ways of love. However, if this same entity, being biased from the depths of its mind-body-spirit complex towards love-light, were then to accept the responsibility for each moment of the time-space accumulation of present moments available to it, such an entity can empower its progress in much the same way as we described the empowering of the call of your social complex distortion to the Confederation.
Okay, let me stop it again really quick. So this is Ra going into more depth explaining about you don't have to learn these lessons in the afterlife, for your understanding to go into a dream state and live the life of the other person in order to get that understanding. What living the law of one is to understand that while you're here. See, if someone is an abuser and they see the person that they're abusing as one of themselves, they wouldn't hurt that person because they're hurting themselves. Because when you go into oneness, right? And the goal to living the law of one is to see the creator in everything and see yourself in everything. Not just when you look in the mirror, it's when you look at everyone, right? And you get this understanding when you're in the afterlife doing your review, when you live their life and see what it was from their perspective, right? But you can do that while you're here. And that's what Ra is trying to say in that little bit. And he goes deeper into it. There we go. Let me go back.
Questioner, could you state this in a little different way? How you empower this call? Ra, I am Ra. We understand you to speak now of our previous information. The call begins with 1. This call is equal to infinity and is not, as you would say, counted. It is the cornerstone. The second call is added. The third call empowers or doubles the second, and so forth, each additional calling doubling or granting power to all the preceding calls. Thus, the call of many of your peoples is many, many powered and overwhelmingly heard to the infinite reaches of the one creation. Questioner, for the general development of the reader of this book, could you state some of the practices or exercises to perform to produce an acceleration toward the law of one? Ra, I am Ra. Exercise 1. This is the most nearly centered and usable within your illusion complex. The moment contains love. That is the lesson goal of this illusion or density. The exercise is to consciously see that love and awareness and understanding distortions. The first attempt is the cornerstone. Upon this choosing rests the remainder of the life experience of an entity. The second seeking of love within the moment begins the addition. The third seeking empowers the second, the fourth powering or doubling the third. As with the previous type of empowerment, there will be some loss of power due to flaws within the seeking and the distortion of insincerity. However, the conscious statement of self to self of the desire to seek love is so central an act of will that, as before, the loss of power due to this friction is inconsequential. Exercise 2. The universe is one being. When a mind-body-spirit complex views another mind-body-spirit complex, see the creator. This is an helpful exercise. Exercise 3. Gaze within a mirror. See the creator. Exercise 4. Gaze at the creation which lies about the mind-body-spirit complex of each entity. See the creator. The foundation or prerequisite of these exercises is a predilection towards what may be called meditation, contemplation, or prayer. With this attitude, these exercises can be processed. Without it, the data will not sink down into the roots of the tree of mind, thus enabling and ennobling the body and touching the spirit.
Okay, so I hope that and for those of you guys that are on YouTube watching this, this is simply the way Ross speaks. Ross speaks in very precise wording. And that's kind of like, I feel like I translate English into English when I start talking about how you have to actually live the life of someone else in the afterlife to be able to have a good understanding of what love is, but how you can kind of convert that to start doing it here on earth. And that's what Ra, again, is just talking about. So yeah, you might want to back it up and listen to it a few times. Hopefully it'll, and then even if you don't really understand the words directly from Ra, kind of just sit with it. And it ends up kind of it kind of like germinates into an understanding for you after you've listened to it. So look, I don't want to stop too far now because this is a long session and well, we're just more than halfway through it. Let's just finish it.
Questioner, I was wondering about the advent of the civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria, when these civilizations occurred, and where did they come from? Ra, I am Ra. This is the last question of this working. The civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria were not one but two. Let us look first at the Mu entities. They were beings of a somewhat primitive nature, but those who had very advanced spiritual distortions. The civilization was part of this cycle, experienced early within the cycle at a time of approximately 53,000 of your years ago. It was an helpful and harmless place, which was washed beneath the ocean during a readjustment of your sphere's tectonic plates through no action of their own. They send out those who survived and reached many places in what you call Russia, North America, and South America. The Indians of whom you come to feel some sympathy in your social complex distortions are the descendants of these entities. Like the other incarnates of this cycle, they came from elsewhere. However, these particular entities were largely from a second density planet which had some difficulty, due to the age of its sun, in achieving third density life conditions. This planet was from the galaxy Deneb.
Okay, let me stop it really quick because this is the first time that Ra talks about Lemuria or Mu. And, you know, some people like to kind of merge them together with Atlantis because they kind of existed within the same, well, in our past. Atlantis was 31,000 years ago. Lemuria or Mu was 53,000 years ago. So Earth goes through cycles every 11,000 years. The Earth gets shook up like a snow globe from a blast from our sun, and the Earth is honeycomb on the inside. So it's got like pillars almost holding up a lot of different types of land masses. It's not like a bedrock all the way through to the center of the core. So when Earth goes through its changes, and there's land masses that will collapse like they're sitting on top of a toothpick and just sink hundreds and hundreds of miles beneath the surface. And so there, you can't just, you know, wipe away a little bit of sand at the bottom of the ocean and find it. You're not going to find it. They're hundreds of miles down. So Lemuria went through this, you know, catastrophic event, and most of the landmass was lost, and they scattered. And you know, Mount Shasta is a place that the Lemurians went to. But Lemuria was not technically advanced. They weren't like Atlantis. They were almost primitive, but they were spiritually advanced, very advanced spiritually. Like some of their like the Lemurian monks would live thousands of years. They knew how to heal their bodies with crystal energies. And, you know, they were able to advance and be very service to others. And they came here, I'm going to butcher this name, the galaxy Deneb. So all the Lemurians were starseeds. They came here for third density from a planet that they were mid third density on their own planet, and it couldn't house them anymore. It's nothing that they did. It was just the cycle of the planet itself. And so they transferred here for third density. And those were the Lemurians, and they are in Russia, North America, South America, all the Indians. They are the ancestors of the Lemurians. So let's continue on, and let's get into Atlantis a little bit. For the first time, really, Ra talks about this stuff. He talks about it a lot in the next sessions, but this is kind of the first time he touches on it. So let's go back.
The Atlantean race was a very conglomerate social complex, which began to form approximately 31,000 years in the past of your space-time continuum illusion. It was a slow-growing and very agrarian one until approximately 15,000 of your years ago. It reached quickly a high technological understanding, which caused it to be able to use intelligent infinity in an informative manner. We may add that they used intelligent energy as well, manipulating greatly the natural influxes of the indigo or pineal ray from divine or infinite energy. Thus, they were able to create life forms. This they began to do instead of healing and perfecting their own mind-body-spirit complexes, turning their distortions towards what you may call negative. Approximately 11,000 of your years ago, the first of the, what you call, wars, caused approximately 40% of this population to leave the density by means of disintegration of the body. The second and most devastating of the conflicts occurred approximately 10,821 years in the past, according to your illusion. This created an earth-changing configuration, and the large part of Atlantis was no more, having been inundated. 3 of the positively oriented of the Atlantean groups left this geographical locus before that devastation, placing themselves in the mountain areas of what you call Tibet, what you call Peru, and what you call Turkey.
Okay. Stop it right there. Very interesting, right? So they say that the Atlantean civilization started 31,000 years ago. And the reason why we're picking that date is because that's when they stopped being hunter-gatherers. They started doing agriculture. And it was a very slow process. It took them from doing agriculture 31,000 years ago. They didn't become technology advanced until 15,000 years ago. So 16,000 years, they just meandered along until they had like their industrial revolution. Now, it was only a few years after that that they had a war, a big war that wiped out 40%. And one of the major reasons that they started going into war was they discovered how to really mess with like cloning. And instead of learning how to heal their bodies using intelligent infinity, they would use technology to produce clones. And that's how they extended their life. And it made them quite negative. And that's what started to happen. Now, it didn't happen to all of them. He talked about that there was 3 groups that left Atlantis before the final cataclysm that sunk it. And one of them was in Tibet, Peru, and Turkey. So let's talk about those 3 that I know about. So we kind of all know the one in Peru, Monte Picchu. So the cataclysm was coming. The people that wanted to leave Atlantis, they before the cataclysm happened and get away from it all, they went to Monte Picchu and they built a civilization on top of the mountains, knowing the cataclysm was happening and they needed to survive it. But you don't know the exact time that it's going to happen. You may know the decade. Just like the next one that we know is coming, we know around within the like 10-20 year time frame that it's going to happen. I talk about that in another. That is not a squirrel moment for this time. I'll talk about that later. So the one that was Monte Picchu. It was the civilization from Atlantis that got built there to survive the cataclysm that they knew was happening. And after the cataclysm happened, and all the tidal waves thrashed around all over the earth and then finally receded, they're like, it's over. And they descended back into the jungle, never to return, because the purpose of Monte Picchu had served its purpose. They didn't need it anymore. The one in Tibet, that one, when part of the civilization from Atlantis went to Tibet, they simply slowly evolved there without the technology that they wanted. And you really don't find any remnants of the previous teachings of Atlantis anymore in Tibet. It's very integrated and distorted. That's there. But the one in Turkey is interesting. So Göbekli Tepe. the civilization from Atlantis that went there, they were sick of the wars, they were sick of the politics, they were sick of the, everything that Atlantis had become, and they wanted to live a more peaceful existence. So after the First World War and the last war that finally did Atlantis in, before the cataclysm, there was a group that went to Globe Tempe. So Globe Tempe is to Atlantis what, like the Amish are to us. They wanted to live a simpler life without all the technology, politics, and war that Atlantis had become. And so Globe Tempe, I think, is a reason that they're really keeping it under wraps about what it really is, because we'll find a lot of information about Atlantis there. And even in the structures in Globe Tempe, they still depict the cataclysms that they knew were coming. And they kind of knew that they weren't going to survive it. A lot of them did scatter out of that area before it happened. But if you look at the symbolism on all the rocks in Globe Tempe, they were trying to depict what they knew was coming, but they were still trying to live a very, almost a primitive lifestyle, like kind of living off the grid, if you will, as far as the Atlanteans are concerned. So those are the three civilizations that we know of that broke away from Atlantis. Okay, and we just got a few more things left of this lesson, and then we're going to wrap it up. So let's quickly get it done.
Do you have any brief questions before we close this meeting? Questioner, only one, other than what we can do to make the instrument more comfortable. I would like to have your definition of galaxy, the word galaxy, as you have used it. Ra, I am Ra. We use the term known to your people by the sound vibration galaxy. We accept that some galaxies contain one system of planetary and solar groups. Others contain several. However, the importance of the locus in infinite time-space dimensionality is so little that we accept the distortion implicit in such an ambiguous term. Questioner, then the 9 planets and sun which we have here in our system, would you refer to that as a galaxy? Ra, I am Ra. We would not. Questioner, how many stars would be, approximately, in a galaxy? Ra, I am Ra. It depends upon the galactic system. Your own, as you know, contains many, many, millions of planetary entities and star bodies. Questioner, I was just trying to get to the definition that you were using for galaxy. You mentioned a couple of times the term galaxy in reference to what we call a planetary system, and it was causing some confusion. Is there any way that we can make the instrument more comfortable? Ra, I am Ra. This instrument could be made somewhat more comfortable if more support were given the body complex. Other than this, we can only repeat the request to carefully align the symbols used to facilitate this instrument's balance. Our contact is narrow-banded, and thus the influx brought in with us must be precise. I am Ra. I leave you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and peace of the one Creator. Adonai.
Okay. Well, yeah, just sometimes it can be hard to distinguish certain words that Ra is trying to express, just to define galaxy there. So I hope you guys enjoyed that session. We went through a lot of information, and that's why I wanted to offer this lesson to those of you on YouTube, just so you can get a feel for what the lessons on the online school are like and how we conduct it. But I will not be putting on YouTube the Q&A that I'm going to do with everybody. That will stay for the students at the online school. But if you like this lesson, and if you like the way I kind of translate what Ra is saying and give you some insight, we call these the deep dive sessions at the online school that you go through. It's the second tier, so like the $25 a month, you'll be able to have access to all of these lessons for all 106 sessions that they did with Ra. And if you want more, there's a third tier, And it's in that tier where I really go into the topics of how the pyramids were built and what happens in the afterlife and what deja vu is. And we'll get into all the Bigfoots and all that other fun stuff that are not in the lessons, but or some of it's in the lessons, but it's a lot of the knowledge that I get from downloads and other things like that. So I hope you guys all enjoyed it, and I will see you in session 11, and I'll see all you other students in the chat.